Developing across parts of England and Wales, possibly up towards Scotland as well. We'll also see thicker cloud moving in as this weather front approaches. It's not going to make too much progress though, so it'll just bring cloudier skies to parts of Northern Ireland and parts of northwest Scotland. But elsewhere, with more in the way of sunshine, temperatures climbing in towards the mid-20s and for many of us into the low 20s. Now Thursday looks like another mainly dry and fine day. Temperatures will climb higher as well on Thursday, but all the while across the north and west it will remain that much cloudier with a risk of some showery rain for parts of Northern Ireland and western Scotland. So the further south and east you are, the more longer-lived sunshine and heat you will see. Temperatures will climb towards 30 degrees for Friday.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems on the M6 in Warwickshire. The motorway is blocked southbound just after the M42 at the scene of a multi-vehicle collision causing lengthy queues on the approach. Meanwhile, in Lincolnshire, the A52, so this is on the stretch midway between Boston and Grantham. It's shut at the Horbling turn-off at the scene of a collision that's being investigated. The Surrey stretch of the M25, meanwhile, blocked both ways, junction 8 to 9 between Reigate and Leatherhead at the scene of an accident. On the M4 in Berkshire, the inside lane shut westbound 8 to 10 towards Bracknell after a car broke down. On the M2 in Kent, one lane shut London bound 6 to 5 from Faversham towards the Sittingbourne turn-off where a lorry's broken down. And in Hampshire, the A35 at Lyndhurst closed at the scene of a serious accident being investigated. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
£30,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours. It's our biggest cash prize of the year so far, and you could be getting that winning call from us to tell you that you're our next Great British Giveaway winner.
I can't believe this.
Oh my God, this is amazing.
That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon.
I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh, you shocked me. I never won a penny in my life.
If I was there, I'd buy you a drink.
For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us! Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Yes, I'm back again with a distinguished panel. We'll talk about, is a Donald Trump victory now inevitable? And what do we make of his vice presidential pick, JD Vance? Let's talk defence. After all, nobody else did during the general election campaign at all. Labour about to launch a defence review. Are they right? Is NATO our future? Or somehow are we going to get closer to a European defence union? The King's speech comes tomorrow, but I wonder, before we hear that, just how healthy is our democracy given some of the turnout figures in this general election? But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thanks very much indeed, and good evening to you. Jay Slater's mother says the confirmation of her son's death in Tenerife is the worst news she could have received. In a statement, Debbie Duncan said she can't believe what's happened to her beautiful boy, adding, "Our hearts are broken." The 19-year-old from Lancashire disappeared off the island a month ago after attending a music festival. A Spanish court says his body was identified by his fingerprints during a post-mortem examination, and the injuries to his body are consistent with a fall which then led to his death. Vaughan Gething told the Welsh Parliament today that serving as First Minister has been the honour of his life, as he announced he's stepping down after just 4 months in the job. Earlier, 4 members of his cabinet quit, saying they didn't think he could deliver a stable government. He's been under increasing pressure since losing a no-confidence vote last month over concerns about a donation to his leadership campaign. But he insists he's done nothing wrong.
I have worked hard, followed the rules, and done really difficult and demanding jobs for my country. In 11 years as a minister, I have never, ever made a decision for personal gain. I have never, ever misused or abused my ministerial position. My integrity matters. I have not compromised it.
And that wasn't the only resignation today. England defender Harry Maguire says his boss, Gareth Southgate, produced memories that will last forever in his time as England manager. Southgate resigned as manager following the squad's defeat to Spain in the Euro 2024 final on Sunday. Goalkeeper Jordan Pickford has also been active on social media to thank his former boss for always believing in him. Now, the government's launched a major assessment of the UK's future military. As the Prime Minister warned today, the world is more dangerous and more volatile. Sir Keir Starmer's promising to bolster what he described as Britain's hollowed-out armed forces, but he's not offered a timeline for raising defence spending to 2.5% of UK GDP. That comes as the new Defence Review Chief, Lord Robertson, said the UK faces urgent threats now from the deadly quartet of China, Iran, Russia and North Korea, who, he said, are acting more as one. The government's promising to deliver its findings by the middle of next year. Now, the Deputy Prime Minister's hit back at Donald Trump's running mate's controversial barb that the UK under Labour might be the first truly Islamist country with nuclear weapons. Donald Trump's choice for US Vice President Vance made the joke whilst he was at the National Conservatism Conference in Washington, D.C. last week. The 39-year-old said he was discussing with a friend what is the first truly Islamist country to get a nuclear weapon, then joked maybe it's Iran, maybe Pakistan, and then maybe actually it's the UK since Labour just took over. Well, Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, told ITV today that Mr Vance had said quite a lot of fruity things in the past, but said she doesn't recognise his characterisation of the UK. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Polly Middlehurst. I'm back in an hour, but now, guess who's back?
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Well, good evening. Yes, I'm back again. I have to tell you, the last time I broadcast here, I had no idea that I was going to stand in the general election, and I really, truly mean that. I wasn't going to, but I don't know what it was. Something persuaded me I just ought to do something. So life, I guess, has changed for me a little bit, but there's no reason why I can't be here with you on Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday evenings, and I will do my best to do so. Over the last few weeks, one thing that did happen were the Trick Awards. And guess what? For the second year in a row, I've won News Presenter of the Year. And if you look at your screens, you can see me going up onto the stage, collecting the prize, only to receive the boos of most of the audience. And these, of course, are the woke mainstream media broadcasting brigade on both television and radio. Well, I don't mind being booed. I had 20 years of that in the European Parliament, and I've no doubt I'll get some of it in Westminster too. But really, they weren't booing me. They were booing you because they think you're stupid, but you're not. Thank you very, much indeed. To win that for a second year in a row against the biggest names in news broadcasting really made me very, very proud indeed. Thank you. Now, it was about 11:30, I guess, on Saturday night when I got the call. They've shot Trump. I was horrified, but somehow not particularly shocked. I think some of the narrative that has been whipped up against him, not just by those on the extreme left, but actually propagated through so-called comedians and quite a lot of American mainstream media, made me think that somehow it was inevitable that he would, at some point, face a serious attempt on his life. I find it really hard to believe that the Secret Service could have allowed a man onto the only roof in the vicinity, not 130 yards away from where President number 45 was speaking, by an absolute miracle of fate. I mean, literally, as the guy was about to pull the trigger, he moved his head sharply to look at one of the screens to get some immigration statistics, and the bullet went through his ear. And thank God for that. Thank God for that. Will it change him as a man? I very much doubt it. I very much doubt it. I think he'll be just even more determined to carry on the way that he is. But you see, even before the election, he was looking in an ever stronger position. And I say that because the polling in the key swing states is very much going in his direction. So I wonder, is a Trump win now absolutely on the cards? Give me your thoughts on that. Is he going to win? Farage at gbnews.com. Or, of course, you can go on X, hashtag Farage on GB News. Well, joining me now down the line is Spencer Critchley, Democrat strategist and former communications advisor to President Obama. Spencer, here's a funny thing. Before this appalling assassination attempt, the pressure was beginning to mount on Joe Biden. 20 elected members of the House of Reps for the Democrats, significant Hollywood figures, and others were saying, look, Joe, your time's up, you've got to go. It sort of oddly seems that somehow Biden's position is now more stable since the assassination attempt than it was before. Am I right about that?
Well, I think it's certainly taken some of the attention off of that issue, and of course, deservedly so. It was an utterly horrible event, as anybody who believes in democracy must recognize. By the way, I shouldn't go on before declining your kind offer of a promotion. I was not a communications advisor directly to President Obama. There were very capable people doing that. I was an advisor on both of his campaigns. But yeah, you know, it was an extremely uncomfortable position for President Biden and his campaign as of late last week. I think, of course, our attention must be focused on this assassination attempt, uncovering what kind of failures, as it appears now, led to the possibility of that happening after 43 years without a successful attempt on a president or presidential candidate, although God knows there have been multiple other attempts on other figures, some successful and many, many that the public never hears about. But that issue does remain. President Biden, by Democratic consensus, has one of the most successful records of any president. Actually, I should say not just Democratic consensus. There are many Republicans who see it the same way, whether they're happy about that or not. But given his performance in that debate, there is this open question of what kind of damage that's done to his campaign.
Well, you say the debate, but what about the NATO summit? I mean, Zelensky's introduced as Putin. Kamala Harris, the vice president, is introduced as Trump. I mean, come on. The guy's past it. He's got senile dementia. Doesn't your party just need to wake up and get rid of him?
I don't think we know that. And of course, for every clip of Biden doing something like that, we can produce clips of Trump trailing off at the end of a sentence into gibberish, or giving us a series of disconnected speculations about sharks and electric boats and electric airplanes that supposedly can only fly when the sun is shining. But I think that the key issue here is, first of all, it's a legitimate question. Is there a health condition that people should be concerned about? And I always recommend to clients, as naive as it may sound, both because it's the right thing to do, but also it ends up being the strategically smart thing to do, is start with the truth. If the truth, which can only be known to the people closest to him, is that President Biden does have some kind of serious condition, That's what they should be acting based on, because really, ultimately, there's no way to spin something like that. On the other hand, if this is just a difficulty with language and cognitively he's perfectly fine, then they can proceed with that. The challenge, and commit to it to try to win, but the challenge they face is that politics is almost entirely based on emotion and symbolism and the way people feel about a candidate, often making an unconscious decision within a fraction of a second, as research shows.
That's true.
So no matter how qualified President Biden might be, he's fighting against that tendency of human psychology.
Yeah, no, it's a very, very fair point. Spencer Critchley, thank you very much indeed for joining me down the line from California. Joining me is a distinguished panel of Kwasi Kwarteng, former Tory MP and former Chancellor, of course, of the Exchequer, Sir Nick Harvey, former Chief Executive of the Lib Dems and Minister for the Armed Forces, and Matthew Torbett, a former Labour advisor. Let's, Kwasi, start with you. Sure. The last time this happened, it was Reagan.
That's right.
He was president. He got a bullet very close to the heart. He famously, when he got to the hospital, said to the surgeon, I hope you're a Republican.
Yeah, that's right.
His poll ratings went up by 10%.
That's right.
He won 49 of 50 presidential states, albeit with a great economy.
That's right.
Next time round, can Trump be stopped?
So, look, I think before the assassination attempt, we had that debate, which we all saw.
Yeah.
And I have to say Biden performed disastrously, even by his own admission. So at that point, it looked very likely that Trump was certainly the favourite.
Yeah.
I think if you compound that with this extraordinary event in terms of the assassination, he's got to be the odds-on favourite. I mean, it's very, very likely that he will win.
Yeah, I rather take that view. Sir Nick Harvey, you know, he was in a life-threatening situation, and whether you love him or not, to stand up there and do that. And we all think of the Iwo Jima picture.
That's exactly.
You know, after that terrible battle against the Japanese, Imperial Japanese Army, and the American flag being raised, and that was a posed picture. This was kind of, I mean, that's enough to win him the election, isn't it?
He certainly put him in pole position. There's no doubt about that. I don't, in my heart, think that Biden can beat him, but I wouldn't discount the possibility that even now there is a change of nominee for the Democrats. And then who knows? It depends who it is. It depends what their appeal is, what their weaknesses are. He's the odds-on favourite, as Kwasi says, but it's early to bank it just yet, I'd have thought.
Right. No. Right. Now, he also picked his vice presidential running mate over the weekend. Speculation on this has been endless. It's J.D. Vance, author of Hillbilly Elegy, a best-selling book, and Vance himself coming from a very, very poor, very difficult background, getting qualified in law, serving in a distinguished way as a US Marine, and he's and I've known JD for over a decade. He is a very intelligent, very distinguished guy, but gosh, he's a full-on conservative. Here he was speaking last week in Washington, D.C.
I was talking with a friend recently, and we were talking about, you know, one of the big dangers in the world, of course, is nuclear proliferation, though, of course, the Biden administration doesn't care about it. And I was talking about, you know, what is the first truly Islamist country that will get a nuclear weapon? And we were like, maybe it's Iran, you know, maybe Pakistan already kind of counts. And then we sort of finally decided maybe it's actually the UK, since Labour just took over.
Well, Matthew Torbett, I mean, he was talking to a Conservative conference and he was a bit tongue-in-cheek in what he said, but it raises quite a big fundamental question. Now, I was very, very pleased that the Prime Minister managed to get a few minutes on the phone with Trump. I thought that was very important that he did that. But you've got sort of David Lammy as Foreign Secretary, who said very disobliging things about the President. I presume this J.D. Vance clip's not going to go down very well, is it?
I wouldn't have thought it had gone down very well. And similar to you, I think the more fascinating thing is how is this special relationship going to be managed under a Trump presidency? Because we've had David Lammy say things. I think even Keir Starmer has said things in the past about Donald Trump's conduct or his political views. If I was advising, I'd say let's put it down to a bit of tit for tat. You know, we all say things in certain rooms that we might not say in others. The main thing is the stability of the West when we've got things like Putin.
Do you think this Labour government is capable? I mean, if Trump wins this election, and I think, these two
highly
guys,
likely.
I think
it's all a dead cert.
No, nothing's a dead cert. Right. But death and taxes, I think, was probably Dr. Johnson was right. But assuming Trump does win, and you've got quite a hawkish Conservative Vice President in the form of Vance, is this Labour Party capable of forming good relationships with America? Because it does matter, doesn't it?
They'll have to be. It's as simple as that.
But can they?
I think it depends who they want to put in the ambassadorial role, which there's been lots of talk about. I think, would somebody like David Miliband go down well on the other side? I'm not sure. He's somebody that's, not really said anything political in the sense of putting down Trump in recent years or anything like that. I think Emily Thornberry not being there is also probably a positive. But I think it depends on the people who are around the politicians in the room that will make these conversations work, all being well, on both sides.
Well, it matters. And it matters, folks, because right at the heart of this is, of course, our membership of NATO. And without the Americans, NATO, frankly, is nothing. And I've always seen us as being a very important bridge between America and the rest of Europe. Now, today, John Healey, Defence Secretary, has announced a big Labour review. So where we go with this, whether NATO's our priority or whether perhaps we're going to join a European Defence Union, all of these things matter hugely. And I felt that defence was barely discussed during the whole general election. But in a few moments' time on GB News, it will be.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Now, we've got a story and a half to tell you and bring you now. Our very own GB News political correspondent, who we love very much, Catherine Foster, joins us in the studio, and she's smiling, but she wasn't smiling for the past few days.
Two of her sons, Matthew and Andrew, were reported missing in Bali.
I got a text from a friend saying, can you give us a call, a bit worried about them. Then spoke to a girl they'd befriended who was in Sweden, but they'd met on their travels. And she told me that they'd gone up the mountain. By the time I found out, they'd been missing for 30 hours. They'd gone up the mountain on the Tuesday night, British time. This was the Thursday morning, without a guide. And they'd told her it was really hard. And she told them to turn back, but they hadn't. And they'd sent screenshots from this app with this trail that they were following on the app, screenshots of the app in case there was a problem, and a Snapchat of a Matthew avatar at the top. And she said, I know they made it to the top because I could see that his phone had nearly died. But the trail had actually closed many years ago. So the app, we will need to make sure that that gets taken off the app. But, technology saved them in the end because it was the screenshots and it was the messages that they'd sent, but they should never have been without a guide.
But what were you doing during those 30 hours that Mum couldn't, when the phone died and Mum couldn't get in touch? Where were you? What were you up to?
Well, we were trying to figure out the best course of action, because it started to pour with rain. The amount of rain created a river, like a stream.
Yeah.
We were like, let's follow the stream downhill, and then the sun set, and we just had to sleep in the bushes in the jungle.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, it took us years to get to 2% of our GDP being spent on defence, and even when we did that, we were adding in a lot of various things to get to the number. The Conservatives, before the election, clear we have to get to 2.5. Labour, well, yes, we've got to get to 2.5, but only when we can actually afford it. And today, John Healey, the Defence Secretary, has announced a defence review. Here he was earlier on this morning.
This is a defence review that will place NATO at the heart of Britain's defence policy for the future. We're a changed government. This is the moment of change for our defence policy and our defence strategy. These external reviewers will work with the experts internally to produce what can be a fresh direction for British defence. You cannot give reviewers the freedom to challenge thinking, come up with recommendations and say in advance, we know what you're going to say, we endorse what you're going to say, but we will take very seriously the recommendations that they make.
Now, the defence review, who's going to be on it? Well, it'll be Lord Robertson, who, of course, was the NATO boss for some years, and former Labour Cabinet Minister. He'll head it up. Interestingly, Fiona Hill, who worked as a policy advisor to Donald Trump, will be part of it as well. But whenever I hear the word review, I think, oh, goodness gracious me, they've kicked it into the long grass. And there can be no doubt, certainly in terms of personnel, that when it comes to 14 years of Conservative government, well, just look at it. The Marines and the Navy down by 16% in terms of manpower. The Royal Air Force down by 27% in terms of manpower. The British Army down by a staggering 30% in terms of manpower. I'm joined down the line by former British Army Commander, Colonel Richard Kemp. Richard, when you hear review, like me, do you think, oh gosh, this might take forever?
I do, and the other thing I always think is it's going to lead to defence cuts. I can't think of any review that's occurred in my lifetime, certainly, that hasn't led to the cuts to the Defence Force, or the Armed Forces, rather. I was involved in a previous Labour defence review after Tony Blair took office, and the dominating aspect of that was not to look into what we really needed to defend ourselves. The Treasury dominated that review. There's no question about it. It was all about money, and I suspect this will be pretty much exactly the same.
I also wonder, Richard, strategically, I mean, the fact that Fiona Hill's on this, a former Trump advisor, I think is a good thing, because I believe that NATO is the right thing to put our faith in. And yet, you know, again and again and again, we hear senior Labour figures saying that in terms of defence, we must get closer to Europe. And of course, you know, the European Defence Union, I mean, the boss of the European Commission, von der Leyen, making it very clear that the European Defence Union will mean, you know, one central form of ordering equipment, one central form of control, no national sovereignty. Do you have any indications of what Labour are saying when they come out with these comments, we must get closer to Europe on defence?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Both the new Minister of Defence and the Foreign Minister, David Lammy, both of them declared before the election that they wanted to enter into a defence pact with the EU, and that's exactly what I think they will try and do. It doesn't make any sense, actually, but what it does make sense for is in terms of getting closer and closer to Europe in the broader sense, you know, with a view to not necessarily going back into the EU, but certainly being able to position Britain much more closely in alignment with the EU. And what it does, of course, it brings in EU rules. It brings more and more EU rules into our defence decision-making, which we won't be, if we're going to be a part of this pact, we won't be able to contest them. We will simply have to take those rules. And of course, the greatest danger of joining an EU defence pact and potentially an EU armed forces is that it undermines NATO. You're right when you said earlier on that NATO is one of the most important organisations we're a part of, and it hasn't kept the peace in Europe, but it's certainly tried to. And the EU an EU defence force would undermine that by competing with NATO and taking resources from NATO.
This is my worry. Colonel Richard Kemp, thank you for joining us this evening. So Nick Harvey, former Armed Forces Minister. I mean, Richard Kemp may sound a bit cynical in saying that every review means cuts, but we simply can't afford defence cuts right now, can we?
No, we most certainly can't. And actually, as Mark Sedwill said on the radio this morning, 2.5% may sound a huge advance on 2%, but it'll barely do more than plug the odd gap here and there. The idea that it's going to enable us to rise to the challenge of a new, more insecure world is really not true. I mean, it depends how much the economy grows, but 2.5% of a slow-growing economy isn't really going to do anything much. I mean, it's right to have a strategic look at it, and actually it's right to take a bit of time. I was involved in the 2010 review, which we hurried through in a matter of a few months, fearing that George Osborne would stiff us with an envelope, which we would then have to build a defence policy to fit. And we thought if we got out first, we'd push the size of the envelope up. Well, in and of itself, actually, that worked a little bit, and we did. So I think taking a bit of time is absolutely right. I don't accept the point that you're putting, or that Richard Kemp is putting, that cooperation with our European neighbours is an either-or with reconfirming our commitment to NATO. The two absolutely have to go hand in hand. And if we are going to negotiate some sort of a defence arrangement with Europe, we can't just assume it'll force us to do this, it'll force us to do that. It will come about as a result of a negotiation.
Well, a couple of points here, Nick. I mean, firstly, you know, two command structures, two command centres within Brussels, and I take the view that no man can serve two masters. Secondly, von der Leyen has laid out already that you know, procurement, for example, will be determined centrally. We can't sign up to that, can we?
I don't know that we're being asked to sign up to that. That's what the European Defence Union may be going to look like, but a British bolt-on to it doesn't necessarily have to involve all of that. We've had two command structures for years. We've had EU command structures, we've had British command structures, we've had NATO command structures. These things are perfectly practical and can be worked out. But if a future Trump presidency is going to be less interested in European defence than it has been, and let's face it, this tilt in America from the Atlantic to the Pacific started under Obama, continued under Trump, and has continued under Biden. So whatever the outcome,
although Trump has made it clear, Kwasi, Trump's made it clear that provided all the members pay 2%,
that's right,
he will be 100% behind it.
Yeah, but the issue with the 2.5%, Nick is quite right. I mean, the problem is that, you know, costs in military hardware and costs are rising quite fast. And if you're not growing the economy, 2.5% isn't going to look very different to 2%.
So should we be aiming at 3%?
Well, we should be, but also, the big riddle to all this, and you'll not be surprised at me for saying this, is growth. If we can't grow the economy, we're not going to be able to do anything on this.
No.
And all the debates, you know, and I wasn't a defence minister like Nick, but I was in Treasury, I was in Bays, I was in government for a while, and it's all about the budget and how you
is Treasury the enemy of good defence?
Well, Treasury is the sort of the octopus brain right at the centre of
well, it's some sort of brain at the centre.
The centre of government. And so you would have had battles with the Treasury. And when I was Secretary of State for Bays, I had battles with the Treasury. When I was in the Treasury, well, I only lasted 38 days, but I totally understood the culture. And of course, and I just think that the real riddle to solve is the growth riddle. If we grow the economy at 2%, this becomes a lot more attractive.
Yes.
If we can't do that, and this is where the Osborne thing was, you had to find savings. I mean, what are you going to do?
But kind of the world is in a much more dangerous place than it was when he said. I mean, key question here, Matthew. I mean, John Healey strikes me as being one of the more competent front bench members of the Labour team. I even had a former Conservative cabinet minister saying he'd be a damn sight better than Grant Shapps was. Are Labour going to take defence really seriously? Because there's always been that pacifist wing within Labour. You know, Lammy himself was all for unilateral nuclear disarmament. Are they going to take it seriously?
Yeah, because Keir Starmer didn't vote for things like nuclear disarmament.
No, that's true, but Lammy did.
I agree. I think the point to be made, though, is we need to... I think building a roadmap to how we get to this 2.5% is the right thing to do. Kwasi may remember from some of the 14 years that if you overpromise and underdeliver, that can be worse. I'd rather us say we will get there when we get there, rather than aim a target that you're... Just 1 minute. Sure. And I think the other thing is It's good that you have pointed out, which I was going to try and do, about the army being cut, and we're at the army has less people in it than at the start of the Napoleonic War. That isn't the right way we should be going.
And for some reason, we've outsourced army recruitment to Capita. That's proved to be a complete disaster. Things aren't working. We're going to end the debate there. We've got plenty more to talk about. Some of your views that came back from the earlier debate about is a Trump win inevitable. Graham says, of course, Trump will win and beat Reagan's 49-state victory with a 50-state victory. No, Graham, that will not happen. In some of those East and in California, forget it. But I mean, I do think he'll win and win pretty well. Paul says, I hope to God he wins. We've got a Labour government. England didn't win the Euros. I can't face another disappointing outcome. Well, there we are. Tomorrow, it is going to be the King's speech. We're told that up to 30 measures are going to be announced. But I don't know. I was there last week in this new Parliament with 335 new MPs, and everyone seems to be absolutely thrilled. But I just wonder, is our democracy in some trouble? Is our voting system fit for purpose? And when you look at it and you see that the two big parties have now got their lowest share of the vote for 100 years, does something actually need to change? All of that in just a moment.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Wednesday is going to be a much sunnier day and a drier day for most of us. It's also going to be feeling considerably warmer. For this evening, though, we've still got low pressure in charge across eastern areas, so still some heavy rain to come through some parts of this evening, but behind it, a ridge of high pressure will bring clearer skies for western areas and then more widely through the night across to the east once those showers clear away into the North Sea. So a dry night to come for most of us. We could see the odd shower moving in across northern areas of Scotland, but clear skies mean that temperatures will fall away a little lower than they have done last night. So temperatures around 12 or 13 degrees first thing. But it's going to be a very bright start to the day. I think they'll be making the most of the July sunshine. The best of the sunshine through the day will likely be across the south coast of England, parts of South Wales as well. 15 or 16 degrees first thing. Fairly light winds as well. A bit more cloud across northern areas of Northern Ireland, parts of western Scotland as well. We could see the odd shower moving in across the Highlands and the Northern Islands as well. But for most of us, it's going to be a dry and bright start to the day on Wednesday, which will really make a difference, I'm sure. And it should stay dry through much of the day. There is a risk of the odd shower developing across parts of England and Wales, possibly up towards Scotland as well. We'll also see thicker cloud moving in as this weather front approaches. It's not going to make too much progress though, so it'll just bring cloudier skies to parts of Northern Ireland and parts of northwest Scotland. But elsewhere, with more in the way of sunshine, temperatures climbing in towards the mid-20s and for many of us into the low 20s. Now, Thursday looks like another mainly dry and fine day. Temperatures will climb higher as well on Thursday, but all the while across the north and west, it will remain that much cloudier with a risk of some showery rain for parts of Northern Ireland and western Scotland. So the further south and east you are, the more longer-lived sunshine and heat you will see. Temperatures will climb towards 30 degrees for Friday.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So a day of great ceremony in Westminster tomorrow. The King's speech anticipated there'll be 30 new measures put ahead that the Labour government intend to enact. Whether they do all of them remains to be seen. But, you know, it'll be housing, it'll be votes for 16s, it'll be all sorts of things like that. But as I said before the break, there's a sort of mood of backslapping and self-congratulation in Westminster. And yet, despite the fact we have significant numbers of postal votes, making it easier for people to vote, a turnout of 59.9%, back to recent historic lows. A Labour Party that got almost exactly a third of the vote and 2/3 of the seats. A Reform Party that gets 14% of the vote and less than 1% of the seats. And a Green Party, again, grossly underrepresented. I wonder, is the low turnout a result that people knew what the result was already? Or is the low turnout a result of our voting system making people feel that, frankly, their vote doesn't make any difference? And what about the rise of sectarian voting along religious lines? An awful lot to unpack here. Matthew, this is not 97. This is not Tony Blair in Downing Street with huge cheering crowds of the public. I'm not sure Mr Starmer, or Sir Keir rather, actually met a single voter during the campaign. Literally didn't meet a single vote, and there are maybe security issues around that. But is it right that you can get a third of the vote? 500,000 votes fewer than Jeremy Corbyn got last time round, and 211 more seats.
Whether it's right, I don't know. It's the system we've currently got. It was something I was worried about. For me, when I was on the doorstep, up and down the country, there was a huge amount of apathy for both main parties.
Yeah, right.
I picked up on support for yourself. And whether I agree or disagree with people, they saw reform as something that was real change, as opposed to what Labour were going to offer. For me, you know, Labour seemed to be offering more managed decline and just we're not the Conservatives. I think the party needs to be very careful at seeing such a large majority as votes and not seats. There are many areas where, you know, reform came second, and I think reform will be the main challenges. I would say on the system, though, I was fortunate enough to visit Israel and Palestine last year. I met with several members of the Knesset, the same over at the West Bank, and it was really interesting that we had this discussion about PR because they have a similar system, and they said we can't wait to get rid of it. We want first past the post.
Yes,
I think in theory,
I think
it should work.
Doesn't that depend where you set the thresholds? Because you can get into the Israeli Parliament on 1% of the vote. If you set a threshold of 5, 6, 7%, it wouldn't be like that. I mean, Sinek, you know, the Liberal Democrats for donkey's years talked about proportionality. When the opportunity came, Nick Clegg blew it completely. We had a referendum on a preferential system that you couldn't explain in a sentence, and the whole thing was a disaster. Your number of seats, 72...
finally in line with our vote.
It's actually par, isn't it? It's actually par. You know, the last Labour conference voted for proportional, or a form of... I mean, I've always favoured AV+, you know, where you have 2 ballot papers, one for a local MP, one for an opinion. That was what the Jenkins Commission came back with after Blair recommended it. I just wonder, is the Liberal Democrat enthusiasm for electoral reform, do you think it's as strong as it was?
Yes, absolutely. You can totally rely on the Lib Dems to support measures for electoral reform. Welcome to the club is all I can say.
No, I've been there for 20 years.
No, I didn't mean that. I know you have. But the club of piling up a decent vote and not getting much return for it. What I think
still not much, really.
You know. We need the Conservatives to join the crusade, actually.
No, the Conservatives will never change. You know, even though in the end it might be to their advantage. But Kwasi, I want to raise a different issue with you. We have never seen, certainly in England in my lifetime, sectarian voting. We're now seeing it, aren't we?
So look, I think on that, there were parts of the UK, traditionally like Glasgow and Liverpool, where there was some sectarian on Catholic and Protestant lines. What we're seeing now is, I think, much more militant. And also, it congregates around issues. So clearly, Gaza is a huge deal. And there were voters who voted for the independents whose sole motivation to vote for those parties was on the Gaza issue.
Yeah, but hang on a second. It isn't just the issue. This is a religious vote.
Yeah, it's
a Muslim vote. Let's call it what it is.
OK, but it's centred around an issue. I mean, we did have sectarian... I mean, I was just making a technical point. We had sectarian voting, which was around religion broadly, whereas this is about specific political issues, geopolitical issues, which relate to Islam or religion. So that's the point I'm making. It's like there is a religious element, but it's filtered through very active and pretty aggressive political stances.
I mean, Wes Streeting just crept back in his constituency. And by the way, you know, 3/4 of the Muslim population in Britain don't pose us any difficulty or problems at all. But there's a growing number of young men, particularly, that do. It's the 18 to 24-year-olds that worry me, with the growth of extremist views. This is going to be a nightmare for the Labour Party in 2029.
I think there's a lot of recovery that's got to happen. I think lots of Muslims used to vote Labour. They don't see that anymore. I don't know if that was before Gaza, actually, I would say. I think that's probably heightened tensions. I have been concerned to see, like you, when we have done events, you know, at mosques or other similar places, the elders get it. The elders have seen all this stuff before.
Yes.
It's young, angry.
Yeah. I mean, Kwasi's point, you know, is that Gaza has stirred this up.
I think Gaza has really worked this
up. My worry is, you know, that polling, that jail partner polling, showing 23% of 18 to 24-year-olds. So these are people that are born here.
Yes, that's right.
Think the concept of jihad's acceptable.
And actually, we talk about first past the post, but my God, they were efficient. I mean, that was an efficient vote. I mean, if you know, as a proportion of the vote, they got way fewer than you did in Reform, but of course they got one more seat. So that's the scary bit of it under first past the post, because you can have a handful of seats, maybe a dozen. Or
so electoral reform could be a good idea. Before we finish this segment, we're expecting tomorrow votes for 16-year-olds and the removal of the hereditaries in the House of Lords. Don't we need something more radical, Nick, when it comes to the House of Lords?
Yes, we need a directly elected Senate of about 250 members, and the best thing to do would be to introduce a bill doing exactly that, not try and turn the ancient and venerable House of Lords into
that. I mean, it's an abomination, the House of Lords.
It's slightly
stuff
crazy.
Full of Blair's mates and Cameron's
it's slightly
mates.
crazy, but I think Labour...
Slightly crazy.
No, but the problem,
it's an abomination.
But the issue that they have is that now they've actually got into power, they realise it's a big source of patronage. So the idea that the Prime Minister...
So Starmer's gone soft because he can now...
appoint who he wants.
Dangle baubles in front of people, including party donors.
I thought at the time, why are you getting rid of your largest donor base? I did. I thought it was very strange to be putting caps on things and stuff like that.
You have to put ex-advisors in there.
Yes, quite.
But they won't. It's very hard for Prime Ministers in that position to give away power like that.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid in this, you know, for people who want to reform the House of Lords, I don't think that's going to happen.
I'd love a referendum on the House of Lords. I know the result already. Now, in a moment, we will join the debate that is going to be had in pubs and clubs and houses up and down the country. Gareth Southgate has gone as the England manager. What do we think about his years? Was it right for him to go? And maybe have some thoughts on who should succeed him. Gareth Southgate in just a moment.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Martin Daubney. Weekdays from 3 p.m.
King Charles has launched his own aftershave, costing, wait for it, an eye-watering 135 quid for a 100 millilitre bottle, promising buyers that they can smell just like the gardens of his Highgrove country pile. Now, this is something that Meghan Markle would do, surely not the King. Is this a case of King Charles selling out, watering down the brand, just like Meghan? Well, join me now to discuss this is the royal broadcaster, Helena Chard. Helena, welcome to the show.
Martin,
often on this show, we've had a pop at Meghan Markle, the Sussexers, for selling out, for flogging strawberry jam, and now the King is flogging Pong. Is this really the right royal thing to do?
Do you know what? So the joy of luxury Highgrove splash, you know, at the end of the day, Highgrove is such a special place, and the Highgrove shop sells amazing things on there. And as we know, the profit actually goes towards charity. So it's the King's Foundation, which was formed in 1986. Profits go towards educational and training, and it's all to do with this sort of sustainable world. But not to forget as well the charitable aspect and the whole ethos of the King's Foundation, and that's so important. This is not just something that's going up on the website and just being sold purely to go into someone's pocket. So I think, all in all, I think everyone should have a look at the Highgrove website and see what's on for sale. I mean, there are lots of really lovely, I think pretty fairly priced products. And even more so, go and see the gardens. As we know, King Charles is a keen environmentalist and the gardens are fabulous.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Well, it was another huge disappointment. I have to say the Spanish team were absolutely superb. They just were a young, great team. They were 8-1 against before the tournament began because they were mostly unknowns. They were deserved winners. But, we've had 8 years of Gareth Southgate, and he's taken us to 2 European Cup finals. He's taken us to a World Cup semi-final. And I was thinking, frankly, you've got to go back to Bobby Robson in 1990 to think of an England manager that did anything. We had, 25 years of absolute blooming, not quite 25, but getting on that way, of absolute misery with England's football. And yet, Southgate's style might be a bit dull for some at times. I found it ridiculous that we went on taking a knee long after others did. But you know what? He produced a football team without prima donnas. Yeah. The yobby element was completely gone. Suddenly, if I felt football, national football, was quite wholesome and quite decent. He's gone. He's had 102 matches in charge, Kwasi. I mean, the guy's done a great job, hasn't he?
I think he did a good job, and I'm of the age where I remember Italia 90.
Yeah.
And that was the semi-final, and we really had a huge momentum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was still at school, and we watched, there was one of the few things we were allowed to watch, I think. But now, I think Southgate has done his job. He's
right time to go?
Yeah, I think so. I think to be a great leader, you have to know when it's time to go. And I think he feels he's taken us so far, and he's done his bit, and now he's moving on to fresh pastures.
Too. Matthew, your view on Southgate, the 8 years?
I would say, I'd go further and say he made me feel proud to be British. I was
English?
Well.
I mean, don't get the Scots aren't in this one.
No, something to say. No, I think I was never very patriotic. I err on the side of republicanism, probably, but during the final 2 years ago, I stood up and sang "God Save the Queen" because I thought, as a leader, he showed courage and would take the flak.
That's very interesting.
He would take the flak from the players who would normally get it. He stood up and spoke what he thought. He was sensible. He took his time with things, and at a time where I felt there was a real vacuum of leadership during the COVID and whatever else, he filled that for me.
So that for you, that's sport fulfilling quite an important national good.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a football fan. I had a small career in football before politics, and he for me, he's turned things around for me and made me proud to be
Nick nodding away there.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's been excellent, I agree. Other than Bobby Robson, we had a little hope early under Sven-Göran Eriksson, we all conked out. Yeah. He's brought a calmness, a dignity to it. The football's been good, OK, it wasn't quite right in this tournament. I'm sorry he's gone. I'd have liked to see him do 2 more years and try for the World Cup, but there's a great crop of players there. Someone else can come in and try and make it all click and work, but I think he was beginning to help us carve an English identity.
Exactly Matthew's point.
In a positive way, in a way that wasn't sort of yobbishness and far-right stuff. He was just dignified.
But I thought his
confident,
strength, if I may say so, was the fact that at the beginning of the tournament, we had performed badly, and he got a hell of a lot of abuse. He got loads of abuse.
And yet he went and fronted the fans up.
He did.
That took some real courage.
That's right. Yeah. He was calm. Yeah. He was polite.
Yeah.
He was very much self-composed.
Yeah.
And that's what I think you're talking about. I mean, he was a leader.
I think he's a profoundly decent man.
Yes, absolutely.
I think he's done a great job. Whether he gets a knighthood or not, I don't know. I suspect he probably will. Quick thoughts, successor, any ideas?
I have no real view on that.
It'd be Graham Potters to lose.
Oh, no.
I know, I can't say it.
Here we go. Disagreement is breaking out.
Contact to the FA. I don't want him. I don't want him. A contact to the FA said it'd be him or Eddie Howe, but Eddie Howe won't leave Newcastle.
I thought Eddie Howe was the odds on favourite.
I think
whether he'll leave politicians can put bets on.
You can put bets on, but not with inside information. I think that. How much do you think that hurt the Conservatives?
I think it was. I mean, there were 3 incidents. There was the rain, announcement, which was a disaster. There was D-Day, which I think was profoundly weakening, and then of course the election. Those 3 things. I think D-Day was probably worse.
Oh yeah.
But the election betting was bad, and it was later in the campaign. That's what made it.
The little joke I was making was, I say to the audience, "You've heard of the film The Longest Day?" Oh, I said, "Well, they've redone it with Rishi as the star. It's called The Shortest Day because he went over at lunchtime." Now, finish up with serious politics. Now, Wales has been Labour run. And of course, Mark Drakeford went. Vaughan Gethin came in as the Welsh First Minister, and he has been forced to quit today. And I wonder, Matthew Torbett, I mean, we've heard before that Labour is the blueprint for a national Labour government. It all looks a bit messy, doesn't it?
No, I hope not in this instance. I think Mark
Drakeford... Just for the audience that don't follow this closely, why has the First Minister of Wales been forced to resign?
He maybe has lied about donations he has taken during his leadership campaign. He took them from somebody that I think was a convicted fraudster in the past. It was a large amount of money, £200,000. And then because there was a leak around his government, he sacked a cabinet minister for that, who has absolutely blindly said, "I did not leak."
Yes.
So because of that, he was forced to resign after 4 ministers resigned today and basically forced his hand a bit, sort of similar to Boris way back when. So I think there's still an investigation that will no doubt happen. I think Jeremy Miles will be the odds-on favourite to take it. I think he will need his own mandate. Rishi obviously went around 18 months before he went for an election. Yeah. He should line it up for the May locals or the next May local elections and go for them.
More Welsh elections to come later this year?
He may be forced into it by Plaid. He should try and go for the summer.
Thoughts, Nick?
I'm not sure there will be elections. I think there's a possibility that they will contrive to bring another Labour leader forward and that they'll manage to cling on for the rest of the term.
Is that the most likely thing?
I think that is. I mean, if you look at MPs, and I don't want to be cynical, but they generally elect, and I can say this now because I'm out, but the people in the system won't want to have another election. No. They're much more inclined.
So they'll find another Labour leader, figurehead
or whatever.
The Tories have 3 or 4 leaders. I mean, why can't
the Tories change leaders? I mean, it's very tough to keep up, isn't it, really? Talking of which, just a quick final thought from you on this segment. We're being told the final 2 will speak at Tory conference in early October. Is that how you see it?
Look, I think we shouldn't rush these things. Yeah. And the problem we had before was that we would always be rushing. And I think there needs to be a debate within the party about what the future of the party is. And I think having a final hustings at the conference, we had that, I think, in 2005 with Cameron. I was there. I think that was a good process.
Okay. Who are you backing?
Okay. No, he's not going to say. Right. I'll be at the King's Speech tomorrow. You won't get me tomorrow evening because I will be on an aeroplane. I'm going to go and see my friend Donald Trump and go to the convention. I think it's really important that I do that. I mean, you know, literally, absolute miracle that he has survived. So I think it's the right thing for me to go. But I'll be broadcasting live from Milwaukee on Thursday. Jacob, what have you got coming up this evening?
I'm going to be talking about immigration. The figures we had yesterday showed how high it is. Population growth. And then Labour said, as one of its first U-turns in office, that it's not going to introduce the controls on employers who break the law and so on to stop them getting migrant workers. So they seem not to be taking immigration seriously. After all the damage it did to the Conservatives. I mean, this is the burned fool's bandage finger goes wobbling back to the fire territory.
Yeah, and it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, I thought for some years the population explosion is just impacting on whether it's housing, whether it's health, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's even driving down the motorways. It's
and massive. Integration. We're not integrated as a society because it's happening too rapidly.
We debated that earlier. We're done. We're out of time. I'll be back with you on Thursday.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Wednesday is going to be a much sunnier day and a drier day for most of us. It's also going to be feeling considerably warmer. For this evening, though, we've still got low pressure in charge across eastern areas, so still some heavy rain to come through some parts of this evening, but behind it, a ridge of high pressure will bring clearer skies for western areas and then more widely through the night across to the east once those showers clear away into the North Sea. So a dry night to come for most of us. We could see the odd shower moving in across northern areas of Scotland, but clear skies mean that temperatures will fall away a little lower than they have done last night. So temperatures around 12 or 13 degrees first thing. But it's going to be a very bright start to the day. I think they'll be making the most of the July sunshine. The best of the sunshine through the day will likely be across the south coast of England, parts of South Wales as well. 15 or 16 degrees first thing. Fairly light winds as well. A bit more cloud across northern areas of Northern Ireland, parts of western Scotland as well. We could see the odd shower moving in across the Highlands and the Northern Islands as well. But for most of us, it's going to be a dry and bright start to the day on Wednesday, which will really make a difference, I'm sure. And it should stay dry through much of the day. There is a risk of the odd shower developing across parts of England and Wales, possibly up towards Scotland as well. We'll also see thicker cloud moving in as this weather front approaches. It's not going to make too much progress though, so it'll just bring cloudier skies to parts of Northern Ireland and parts of northwest Scotland. But elsewhere, with more in the way of sunshine, temperatures climbing in towards the mid-20s and for many of us into the low 20s. Now, Thursday looks like another mainly dry and fine day. Temperatures will climb higher as well on Thursday, but all the while across the north and west, it will remain that much cloudier with a risk of some showery rain for parts of Northern Ireland and western Scotland. So the further south and east you are, the more longer-lived sunshine and heat you will see. Temperatures will climb towards 30 degrees for Friday.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's our summer treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest cash prize of the year so far. With an extra £30,000 in your bank account this year, you could take the ultimate financial holiday and send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. £30,000 could get you those nagging home improvements done, buy that brand new car, or just enable you to kick back and relax for the rest of the year. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Go and get another glass of that bubbly, you've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes,
She could have said stump.
you made my argument for me.
No, what- okay, one
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter.